Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, where is the Red Raider rushing attack? And is there any hope for it to appear more often in the second half of the season? Also up ahead, Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark really knows how to spice up a Big 12 basketball media day. We'll get to what he had to say, as well as discussing Thursday's three big things. Looking ahead to Tech in West Virginia from Chris Level. It's next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Back at it again on Locked On Texas Tech, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online's got you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. So get there now. It's Bet Online, where the game starts. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for making us a part of your day once again, whenever, wherever, however. Thanks to those subscribing on YouTube. Do it if you haven't just yet. Catch up on anything you might have missed or anywhere you get podcasts. Happy little Friday to those who are living that life and celebrating that kind of season. And we're kicking off today's show with Big Handsome Chris Level. Thursday's three things. And if this goes well, I may even think about sponsoring this segment, Chris. So I'm curious to see what we're rolling out here. But as we get ready for Red Raiders and Mountaineers, the Duchendorf Cup, the battle for John Denver's soul, a trio of things sticking out to you, as I understand it, looking ahead to this matchup.
Yeah, so I just kind of stumbled upon three different, little things. And I just thought, let's put this thing together. The first one I thought was interesting because this is the third. So Neil Brown will face the Red Raiders for the fourth time as the head coach of the Mountaineers. He is 0-3. This is the third time he will face Texas Tech when Texas Tech comes off of their bye week. He noticed this. He's like, it's just a weird deal. I also think though you don't get the traditional, benefit of maybe catching a team where they're still in their grind because they kind of had a mini bye week since they played last Thursday. So I thought that was interesting. And I think Neil was asked about this week, and he's like, I don't know, man. It's just conference offices. He didn't really make any excuses, but anyway, it is something.
Well, and that's something too that I think a coach never misses. Every coach in America, they may not even know the name of every guy on the roster, but they know their open weeks and they know everyone else's open weeks, right? That's always at the forefront.
Yeah, because that's where we always hear about it. Yeah, man, right. We're they got to buy before us or whatever. You're right. None of us, for the most part, notice that kind of stuff, but they all do. They all study the schedules. Here's the other thing, and I looked this up just to make sure that it was right. But in that game that West Virginia played versus Baylor, I've never heard of this. It's shocking to me that they actually still won the game. But they gave up, and so it kind of makes you wonder if Texas Tech can maybe have some similar success. And I would think, man, if you do, you're going to win the game. But I can't believe Baylor didn't. But we realized that Baylor had 18 plays in this game of 15 yards or more. 18 plays of 15 yards or more. Explosives, quote-unquote explosive plays. And yet Baylor did not win because they turned it over 3 or 4 times. That just goes to show you turnovers, man. Like you give it away, it's just going to cost you because typically, man, if you have around 10 – you maybe have run away from somebody because
chunk plays you're talking about.
Yeah, those explosive ones, like when they go for large numbers, because it doesn't mean that those plays didn't go for 70 or 60 or whatever. I'm just saying you limited it at 15 plus, and they had 18 of them. 18, so big number, and yet they, West Virginia was able to survive it. I can't imagine on the road if Texas Tech has some similar success, and we've talked about that. The Red Raiders, that's kind of where they struggle. You need more of those chunk plays. Trey Cleveland has had some. You need more longer plays, make it easier on your offense, your quarterback, all that stuff. Then the last thing, and this is where it kind of ties into the previous point, the turnovers. Do we realize that Texas Tech, okay, you've played 6 games, okay? We know if you've been playing hard football, you've been playing good football, you've been playing, you've fought, you've competed, and all those things. You are 127th out of 131 teams in turnover margin, okay? You've given it away 13 times and only taken it away 7 times. So you're -6. The next closest team in the Big 12 is 91st, okay? That is Baylor, who's only given it away 8 times. So you've given it away 5 more times to this point in the season compared to the next closest team. So we can talk about all these different players and schemes and quarterbacks all we want to going for it. You don't get that cleaned up in the last 6 games, guess what? You're going to be about 500 or worse. That's just that's the facts, man. So
I have a question.
Okay.
How dare you? What the hell did I do to you? I mean, I didn't know that before 5 minutes ago, and now you're throwing that at. I knew it wasn't good, but good grief, that's
but you know what?
Air.
I didn't either, but I wanted to see kind of where it ranked. I mean, you're clearly dead last in the Big 12, but I just wanted to see kind of how bad it was. I mean, but 13, you know, because I mean that really tells the story of your season so far.
But Chris, I kind of hate both numbers. I'm mad at not taking it away more as well, I think.
So is Joey McGuire. Yeah.
I mean, I don't like anything going on there really right now.
I agree. And I think he even said earlier in the week, biggest surprise to this point in the season for him is that you haven't taken it away more. You know, and you know, Spencer Sanders tried to throw it to you a couple times and just couldn't do it. But they, you know, I've talked to some of those guys this week. They've worked on it every day. They talk about it. I mean, and it comes in bunches. So hopefully when it turns, it'll really turn. But
you got to guess at why it's not clicking? I mean, is it something that the other teams are keeping away from them? Is it?
No, I just think you've got to be, you know, now granted, the one time you did take it away, it resulted in one of your best wins of the year, and clearly the best win, which was the Bijan Robinson fumble. And so
that should count for 3 or so, maybe.
Exactly. But it just goes to show you, depending on the timeliness of them, they can be massive, a massive swing and all those things. So,
well, in your chunk play mentioned earlier, it goes to show you that turnovers can negate even the biggest things for the opposition or the biggest weaknesses for yourself. We talked about prior to the year, you know, plenty of times seeing Oklahoma State always stands out in my mind. But there have been plenty of teams over the years who have had really good to great seasons with defenses who are bending up and down the field, but are probably like top 5 in the nation whenever it comes to taking the football away. There's just no play like that. I mean, there's no quicker way to get somebody off of the field, obviously, than to just take it away from them. And thankfully, you know, the hall monitors might take this away from us at some point in the future and say, no, it's too hurtful to the other team to allow turnovers. So let's enjoy it while we can. They're still allowing them right now. Maybe we need that reminder. But yeah, I'm down on the offense, giving it up so much. I'm probably, though, Chris, see if you agree or disagree to wrap up this conversation. I'm probably less disappointed in that number for the offense, given the fact that you've gone to a second quarterback who's turnover prone, and now a third quarterback who, I don't know, but you've gone to a third quarterback. I'm probably actually more frustrated with the defense that their number isn't better. If I expected like a bad to disaster range, maybe I'd allow more grace on the offensive side of the ball, given what's happened with your quarterback position. But where are the guys defensively? I mean, we printed up the shirts. We should have 18 by now. It's supposed to be take 3 every week. We got 7. I mean, that's like a guy investing in a pair of Dockers to sell out there, or a wholesale. You get a nice wholesale deal somewhere. You got Dockers in your spare room, and hey, I'm going to unload these things. All of a sudden, the market tanks. Honey, now I got to burn 1,000 Take 3 university shirts. What am I supposed to do with all of these things? We're making bed sheets. We need more turnovers. Can I ask you this? Well, I just asked you a question, didn't let you answer. But I'll ask you 2 questions here, and I'll let you answer both to wrap it up.
Okay.
Do you expect something to change more so defensively or offensively? Who might be in for some better luck second half of the year?
That's a great question. You know, because I think to your point, I think, you know, if you'd have told me you're going to start 3 different quarterbacks, I wouldn't have been necessarily surprised that you were going to turn it over some. And let's be honest, you've played, because some of these came on the road, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, NC State. You had 3 in the second half versus Texas. These are all really good teams. At least at the time that you've played them, they were all really, really good, or you're on the road in a hostile environment. But the biggest thing to me is the fact that you've started 3 different quarterbacks. That's going to compound that problem. And I think just trying to work different guys through and trying to cater game plans to them and all that stuff, that's clearly factored in. So I think, to answer the second question, that number to me, if you'll get continuity at that position, that number is going to come down, because I think they're learning how to play in that, man, if we just avoid those mistakes, if we just, maybe live to fight another down, let Austin McNamara come out there and punt that thing or something instead of trying to force something. Let's keep ourselves in the game instead of trying to force something. I think that number will come down. And defensively, the number, because you're not playing on the road as much, okay, and because you're not playing maybe against as good of a team, maybe in the second half of the season, that number has to go up too, you would certainly think. I mean, typically, teams go on the road and they turn it over, which is kind of what you did. And so I would look for both of those numbers to kind of, even out, because you're like, let's see, just to make some of my, you're -7 right now. I think I misspoke. I said -6. You're -7. Yeah, so it's even worse than I thought.
Shivering me timbers.
And seeing it here, I was mentioning Baylor. They've given it away 8 times. Okay, they're only -2 because they've taken it away 6 times. So, and that's the next closest team in the Big 12. That just shows you how far off you are compared to everybody else in the league. But I just think quarterback continuity and maybe more home games evens that number out. But I bet you'll be closer to 0 when all is said and done instead of -7. So let's hope I'm right. And if you are, I bet you've won 4 of your last 6.
You're definitely going to a bowl game, I think, if that's the case, and maybe one you didn't anticipate. And I enjoyed the hell out of that. Dibs on sponsoring that feature. I have first right of refusal, and maybe we'll do it again coming up next time around. Coming up, dead ahead. Geez, Brett Yormark continues spicing up the TV network, pot of chili on the stove. This guy really knows how to make a basketball media day interesting. I'm liking the latest comments from Brett Yormark. We'll get to that coming up directly ahead. But first, Sweat Block. We're blocking sweat. This is an NIL opportunity, I think, for the next Red Raider to block a punt. Whoever it is, come see us. We'll connect you with the fine folks at Sweat Block as we're blocking sweat. Chris, I used to have college roommates who sweated profusely. They had all these medicated things to put under their arms, essentially would just incinerate the armpit flesh. You ever heard of something like this? Like this medicated deodorant? It basically just burns all your pores closed. I mean, it's wild.
We all know the people that they could just be standing there and it's like, oh my God, they're just and then there's other people that have run a marathon and it's like, dude, have you had any water? I mean, they're just like, I'm like, dude, you don't look like you even ran at all. I mean, I'm glad to be one of those people that's very much in the middle. I don't have a problem with it either way. Yeah.
If you're like me, because I'm in the same category, I think it's the Choctaw in me, my Native American, original American ancestry. If I had to guess,
of course,
but it may still be something for you, Chris. I did call you Big Handsome earlier in the program. I'm keeping the stuff around the house now just to toss to the wife when I walk into the room, because she anyway, newlyweds, what are you going to say? So maybe think about it for those reasons if you're not the one that might be working up a sweat here or there. Do away with the medicated deodorant. Seriously. I mean, I don't know how many times we had to take a fire extinguisher to the roommate's armpit because the pores were just singed to a 5th, 6th, 8th degree level, whatever. He still ain't right from that. So go with our friends at Sweat Block. Change the game. It was created by a doctor to help with his own excessive sweating once upon a time. So it's doctor created, doctor recommended. If you or someone you love is experiencing embarrassing sweat or odor, try Sweat Block today and save 20% when you do it with the promo code Locked On at sweatblock.com. Also available on Amazon. On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day with the only Chris Level I'm Casey Cowan. Subscribe on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts, and join us each weekday morning for brand new episodes. And we'll be back to weekend coverage coming up as the Red Raiders are back at it after an open week on Saturday, taking on the Mountaineers of West Virginia. We're back to the Red Raiders, the Duchendorf Cup, and all points in between as we wrap up the program up ahead. I want to talk about an offensive positional group that I thought was pretty good and pretty talented, and maybe among positional groups, one of your best on the team, yet the production hadn't mirrored that. And I'm wondering, where are they and why are they there? We'll discuss that coming up ahead. But first, I wanted to get back to the guy that I called yesterday, and I think I may roll with it at least until he irritates me, God's College Conference Commissioner, Brett Yormark. Big 12 commissioner, spicing up a Big 12 basketball media day again. Men's basketball, the topic of conversation in Kansas City yesterday, and we hope that by now you have checked out our bonus Big 12 men's basketball Locked on Texas Tech Media Day coverage, bonus episode there on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. If you haven't checked it out already, sound from Mark Adams and a few basketball thoughts from yours truly and Chris Level. So we get ready to kick off that calendar. But Yormark wasn't talking basketball at this point again. He was back apparently to a football perspective. I know it involves everything, Chris, but turned by the football world, television network agreements. Been a lot of talk about, hey, we're not going to get to this exclusive window 16 months from now. We're opening up early negotiations. We all want to be at the table, that being the Big 12, ESPN, Fox, etc. And then you see some pretty interesting news, I guess you'd have to call it, from Ari Timken, the host of Big 12 Now on Sirius XM, who tweeted from Kansas City that Yormark says the decision on a new television deal, quote, will be made in the next week or two. This seemed like something fresh to me, and it certainly got my attention. How about you?
Well, okay. And so if we parse words here, does he, he doesn't say a new deal will be made. He said a decision will be made. And so here's what I take from it. I take that he is suggesting maybe there is a deal, or we've decided we're all in with Fox and ESPN, and we're gonna make a deal and those things, because I've been really surprised at how outspoken he's been about this, because in some ways he must feel really good about what he's hearing or where they stand, because in some ways you could make the argument he's kind of hurting his own leverage by talking about how good he feels about it. However, I do wonder if he means we'll know in the next week or two whether we're going to get a deal with these folks, or we're going to just say, hey, man, we're punting. We're going to go on down the road, and we're going to wait for our exclusive rights window to expire, and let's take it to the open market so we can talk to Apple, Amazon, whoever else wants to.
Let me read this.
Is that how you took it?
Again. Well, let me read this to you again, and it is a tweet that brought this news to us, right? Deal or decision. The tweet says, Brett Yormark said a decision on a new TV agreement will be made in the next week or two. So I think that sounds like what you're alluding to there, that it may not be necessarily like, here's the parameters of the deal.
Right.
But, hey, we're going to strike a deal. ESPN, Fox, whatever. The tweet does go on to say, seems like the Big 12 could be trending towards extending current partnerships with Fox and ESPN as opposed to taking rights to the open market. Does that still sound like, I mean, we're not getting to this this window 16 months from now, that maybe we're getting something sooner rather than later?
I think that's right. And here, and my fault for not explaining better when we talked about this originally, but here's also what people need to understand. So people are listening to us, need to grasp this part. This is because ultimately you and I, we're only going to see that big dollar figure that each team is getting at the end of the year. I think we saw the latest one was like 42, 43 million that each Big 12 school was getting. Here's what this only involves, though, and here's where it's going to get interesting. This is only your first and second tier rights money. I don't know how much of that money makes up each school's 43 million. Am I making sense? Because also what factors in college football playoff, NCAA tournament, your own third tier rights, which you're kind of in charge of. So we could see a number. And the reason I kind of got looped into this is because there's a follow-up tweet by Ari Timken, who kind of originally did this. He hosts the Big 12 show on ESPN every day from 7 to 10 in the morning. But he also writes, Yormark told me to call him and ask for clarification when we see this reported. He told me to, so almost like, because I think what you're going to see is, hey, they're getting 20 million or 25 million. It's going to be far less than the big number that we're used to. However, it's because it doesn't have all the other stuff factored into it. This is only an agreement for the first and second tier rights. I don't know how much of each school's deal that first and second tier right compromises, because we also have the playoff expanding. So I would expect maybe more money there. We all know that that all the leagues are going to have an automatic qualifier. Even during the expanded part, I would guess there's more money there. So anyway, I'm probably talking in circles in a way, but I just hope people understand, if they initially see a number that's far less than that giant number that's all anybody cares about. And some people don't really even care. I mean, some people are like, yeah, that's fine. But I just, people in some ways should care, because that's how you afford to pay the coach, or you go able to keep an offensive or defensive coordinator, or go hire, an assistant coach in basketball, or all the things that comes with that, because that's where that money comes from. And you want to be able to compete at the highest levels. And so I think in some ways, you want that number to be as big as possible, because if the Big Ten and the SEC are like it in the 80 range, for example, then you're hovering around 40. That's a pretty big gap.
Yeah,
so
it is.
He's trying to close it, but that, hopefully I've explained it and not made it clear as mud there on kind of what we're dealing with here. But I'm telling you, man, I'm shocked at how transparent he's being. I'm shocked at how he seemingly feels so good about it, because if he doesn't have anything close to a deal, I think we're all going to be potentially disappointed and go, hey, man, I thought you said we may see something next week or two. I thought you felt pretty good about it, and then nothing. So what gives?
Who was the guy that was like real loud? And I mean, even among this category of people, that super loud press secretary for Trump one time, and he lasted like 36 hours, and then he just disappeared from the face of the earth. I can't. Scaramucci. He was like a reality TV show character, which again, there may be a few on that map. Anyway, I hope Brett Yormark's not pulling a Scaramucci here on us, where like all of a sudden the stroke of midnight, he turns into a pumpkin, and he was never actually here to begin with.
I hope not.
Because the show he's putting on right now is pretty entertaining. Yeah,
I agree. And this is 2 days in a row that he's talked about it and been fairly, I don't want to say brazen, but I mean, I just think he's kind of showing you his hand. He almost is kind of telling you, yeah, I got aces under here, man. That's where we talked about that yesterday.
If the shoe is brazen and the brazen shoe fits, then it's a brazen shoe that Brett Yormark is wearing. So that's the way I think it crumbles here today. And you may see pretty soon coming up some things that might surprise you from a numbers standpoint. Say if you're on the left coast or consuming certain media outlets that might not have you thinking the Big 12 has a breath left to breathe. So prepare for that, because I know some friends are joining us, say, from California and the like. Could be coming up. Coming up before we're done on today's episode of Locked On Texas Tech, I got a question for Chris Level regarding 2 spots on the offensive side of the football. Are we going to get a QB1 name before kickoff? Should we get a QB1 name before kickoff? We'll talk about an advantage or disadvantage. And I want to get to your stable of running backs, because there's a name added to it that we hear is going to be healthy and available that we haven't seen so far this season, coming up this weekend when they take on West Virginia. But we'll also talk about those 2 guys at the top of the list who I know are good running backs. So why has the rushing game not been good through the first half of the season? We'll get to that coming up ahead. But first, it is our friends at Bet Online, and we may have some odds with Bet Online here pretty soon, Chris, on what, say, a television agreement's going to look like for the Big 12, because they're covering everything else under the sun at Bet Online. It is the live betting HQ online, and that's because they make it easy on you, the user, to not only keep up with the events you care about, but also your team on game day. So get there now to get the jump on all the angles, the action, and the angles on the action as you're getting ready for another college or professional football weekend. The fastest, easiest way to check in on all of your events with our friends at Bet Online. So head there today or use your mobile device to learn more about what the trends are looking like this week with Bet Online, where the game starts. It's J Salsa Company, your salsa family therapy. And that's a free jingle for my friends at J Salsa Company, just because I love them that much. JSalsaCompany.com is what you need to check out online. If you're not in Texas or New Mexico, no problem, because they'll ship anywhere in the U.S. Again, right now at jsalsacompany.com, they got the hot, they got the mild. I'll let you in on a little secret. You're going to want them both. So go ahead and get them both. jsalsacompany.com, or you see it right there on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. If you're in Texas or New Mexico, you can find them there in over 90 stores, most United supermarkets, Albertson supermarkets, Market Streets. And if you are blessed by the hand of God to be in the 806 near Lubbock, Texas, America, or in the city, you can find Jay's Salsa at H-E-B. And it's easy to find because it's got that beautiful red and black jar that just pops. It's popping right there on that grocery store aisle. So check it out in person in over 90 stores in Texas or New Mexico, or get into an unboxing kind of experience. Maybe put it up right there on YouTube. You can slap it into the comments right here on Locked On Texas Tech. If you're not in Texas or New Mexico, shipping anywhere in the U.S., get busy right now with this Red Raider family recipe at jsalsacompany.com. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech a part of your day every day. It is your team every day on the Locked On Podcast Network, so why not subscribe on YouTube if you haven't yet, or anywhere you get podcasts. He's Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and I want to let you listen in to a thought earlier in the week from head coach Joey McGuire, as I believe he was asked about naming publicly a starting quarterback for this weekend's ball game against the Mountaineers. And he got into that and kind of how the process was going to play out throughout
Barron
this week.
took the majority yesterday with the ones. Donovan got some. It'll really be, as the week goes, who has the best week. I think it's one of those deals, we've seen both of them play a lot. Of course, we haven't seen Tyler play a lot in this offense, but, how we feel, who gives us the best chance against West Virginia. But, I think with where we're at, I think you're definitely going to see both of them more in this game than what you've seen them of late.
Chris, is there any advantage or disadvantage to naming one? And did you ever for a second anticipate public naming of one this week?
I don't know. I don't think that's how he really. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if I thought that Joey would be one of those guys that's going to tell you who his starting quarterback is if there's a question about it. I think there's several things that are going on here. One, you've got three quarterbacks, as we've talked about, that are all semi either injured or coming back from an injury or whatever. So there's not a clear cut answer. I think if Barron wasn't dinged up, I think he would have told you, or coming off of being slightly dinged up with that ankle issue, I think he would tell you he's the guy. That's the only reason there's a question right now. I think if Tyler was already cleared and able and 100%, available, I think he would have told you that. That's my guess. I'm not going to be surprised necessarily because, keep in mind some of this press conference stuff that you're hearing right there in that comment that you hear from Joey McGuire. I think Tyler Shuck had an appointment after that, and then
that was from Monday,
and Monday is an off day, and so maybe something has changed. If he's going to be in uniform this week, it's not going to surprise me a bit. If he goes through warm-ups, it's not going to surprise me a bit. If he's available, it's not going to surprise me a bit. Am I willing to tell you that I think he would be the starter? That would surprise me, I guess, just because I just don't know if you would do that to him or everybody. But I don't know what I don't know, right? So I don't. But I based on what I know right now, my guess is going to be Barron until you kind of see or hear otherwise.
Is there just a general advantage in keeping it closer to the vest if you don't have to divulge anything, or what do you think on that?
Well, I think you want to make sure that teams are having to. I don't know if you're preparing any different way defensively because of this guy. I think maybe you prepare for Donovan a little bit differently than if it's Barron or Tyler, just because of how big and physical Donovan is and how much maybe he calls his own number in the red zone. And so there may be a slight tweak defensively there. But I don't know if if you're adjusting anything. So, and keep in mind here too, Casey, just so we understand, because people, I've seen it. People are getting real irritated. I don't know necessarily why, of Joey talking about playing them all and all that stuff. You got to understand what the guy is trying to do here. You're trying to keep them all engaged. You're trying to keep them all here technically, and you're trying to keep, and that's part of it too, in that you don't want to go, nope, this is our guy. These other two are not playing. That, you know, they can hold a clipboard. I mean, that's part of the game that you're having to play this day and age too. And I know it's irritating. And I'm telling you, I know you can not believe me. They practiced a ton of plays, a ton. And I'm not saying a ton is 30, but there's a lot of different plays they practiced with all three of them on the field in August. And they were ready to put them out there and like, let's get it, because you really can like have some fun with it. And I think that was the point. You just haven't had the ability to do that. But I'm telling you, as soon as all three are healthy and available, you're going to see some of that. I just firmly believe it. You're going to see some of it. And whether it's gadgets or wanting you to think it's a gadget or who the heck knows, but I think they spent way too much time on it. But that's where I'm at on all that stuff.
All right. Appreciate that perspective. And before we get out of here, as I said a little bit ago, I know you have two good running backs. I want to get to also the third guy that's going to be added to that mix, I think, this week. But I know you got two good running backs, and SaRodorick Thompson, Taj Brooks. It hadn't been good, or at least consistently good. Certainly not from both of those guys, but just really as a rushing game for the team through the first half of the season. Even with sack-adjusted rush yardage taken into account, I don't believe you've been above 4 yards per carry as a team since week 1 against Murray State. I don't think you've topped that mark against another team. What's the deal? Because I'm thinking, all right, I don't know, play calling, strategy, offensive line, running backs themselves, defenses, and probably the reasonable answer is maybe some of all of the above, but we're not here to necessarily be reasonable. And I actually did get into to some numbers, Chris, looking play calling wise. With sacks taken out of the equation, you still run it through 6 games, I think like 20 more times than you did last year. So it's not like going away from it necessarily. Is it the offensive line? Am I circling around the answer? Where is the ground game? Because I know you got at least 2 talented running backs that can produce.
Yeah, you do, and I think, you know, and obviously with SaRodorick, he's been a bit dinged up, but I mean I think they haven't run the ball near as well as they thought they would and could, and I think some of that is offensive line. I think, you know, we sound like a broken record, but part of it too, let's be honest. How many really good defensive fronts have you faced for the season? And that's
gotta mention it
too. That's part of it too. I think there's been a reason to think about it. You're 2 quarterbacks that have registered rushing touchdowns, because Donovan has 4, Barron has 1. Your running backs, Taj and SaRodorick, combined for 6 touchdowns. And so your 2 quarterbacks, I mean, Shuck doesn't have 1, but the other 2 combined for 5. So I think that teams have kind of keyed on that, especially when you get down close to the 10-yard line, 5-yard line, stuff like that. So I think you've been able to get teams on that zone read stuff, and your quarterbacks just keep it, or Donovan in a couple of cases just barreled his way into the end zone, because teams kind of know what you're wanting to do and what you're comfortable with. Because of the lack of quarterback continuity, they know you're not necessarily willing to chance to throw deep in that. So, you know, they know you're going to keep your own number or call your own number, or you're going to look to run it, and teams have maybe try to take that away. But it's got to get better. I think part of that is because you're not going to face as good, you know, we have the turnover conversation too, and about home and all these things. But I just think the level of opponent, especially up front, isn't quite as good on paper in the back half of your schedule as it was in the front, you know, half. Now, maybe we'll see. And maybe you're just going to come away going, man, we just weren't very good at it. But West Virginia has gotten a lot better at it as the season has gone along and all that. And you need to as well, because sometimes teams are going to say, you're killing us with throwing the ball all over the place. So we're going to drop everybody back, and we're just going to dare you to be good at running it. And you need to be good enough to be able to do that.
Yes, you do. And you know me, every week is run the damn ball week in my life, even in the middle of the summertime. I'm just looking for somebody to establish a ground game. So I like what you're saying there. And certainly with the schedule as it plays out, I would think some of the better, not to take anything away from these guys up ahead, but some of the better defensive fronts might be in your rear view. But got to go out and make it happen. So maybe the answer in most parts is all the above needs to be better, and maybe it will be in the second half of the season.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was just expecting. I bet you were too. I was expecting a lot more from Taj Brooks this year. You know, I'm just sitting looking at to make sure 4.1 yards a carry. He's only rushed for 215 yards total, and his long of 23. I just kind of thought there was a next step there. I don't think anything's been wrong with him per se, because I mean, in that Oklahoma State game, it was really Roderick was getting the carries and the bulk of the carries, and I just was surprised. But you know, they just lack burst. You know, those two guys are good running backs. They just can't.
Oh, okay. And tell me about Valdez.
Cameron Valdez. Yeah, Casey, and I think he's kind of a guy that maybe is a bit of a change of pace guy. What I mean by that is there may be some more, you know, Miles Price type twitchiness type speed overall. I would guess, you know, because he's coming off of an injury. They thought they had him back 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then there was like a hamstring injury. So that's tricky for a guy that's fast. And I'm not saying that you have like some game breaker back here, but he is, I think, different than the other two. He's not quite as big and stocky or strong, but I think he is fast. And I think that if he does break the seal in his season this weekend, I bet you try to manufacture a couple of touches for him just to kind of get him going, because he only got 6 carries in his career. I mean, this is a young guy, but he was a big-time recruit. He was a big-time all-purpose type guy coming out of high school. But I just think – but here's the other problem. It's hard to get 3 guys carries and all that stuff. That's just unrealistic, because in the fourth quarter, say, okay, one guy's got 9 carries, the other guy's got 6, and you're in the game. Who's the hot hand? Can we get a third guy some touches? I mean, you see, it's hard to divvy it up as much as you've been throwing it lately. So I'm kind of fascinated to see how that goes. But I'd be willing to bet there's a few plays called specifically to get Cameron the ball if he's ready and available this weekend.
Interesting. Keep an eye on that for sure. And keep an eye right here on Locked On Texas Tech as we're coming back around for one more this week on the other side of conversation for Chris with the head coach Joey McGuire on his radio show. And we'll have some thoughts on that as we wrap up the week and we get ready for the Red Raiders and the Mountaineers. And after Locked On Texas Tech, we hope you make Locked On Big 12 with Josh Neighbors your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And don't forget to check out our basketball conversation right here on Locked On Texas Tech. Bonus episode. You can find that anywhere on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. For the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you the next time around. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Keep hope alive, my man.
We're going to do it because we have no other choice. There's still a lot of football out there to be played. And like we're beginning to get our minds accustomed to, basketball season just right around the corner. And you got a top 25 program over in that building. So hope will remain alive, I believe. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for joining us once again on the Locked On Podcast Network on Locked On Texas Tech.